So, was anybody else preparing themselves for this show? How's it going, guys? Welcome to my breakdown and review and recap of the Book of Boba Fett Episode 1. I didn't know whether to call you bounty hunters because I suppose in one of the recent trailers he was just like, I'm not a bounty hunter. But either way, yeah, I've been looking forward to the Book of Boba Fett. I mean, a lot of people enjoyed his return in The Mandalorian. And speaking of a Mandalorian, has anybody seen a baby Yoda? A baby Yoda? Because I meant to give this Beskar as a bounty reward. No? Anyone? Okay, alright. No, but really, let's get into this breakdown. Don't forget to leave me your thoughts down in the comments below. I read every single comment, so I'm really interested to see what you thought of this first chapter. And other than that, just do consider subscribing because we'll be breaking this down each and every Wednesday. So at the very beginning of the episode, it opens up with Jabba's old palace with the empty throne room, cutting to the living quarters of Boba Fett in this Bacta tank, which was kind of like a nice detail. It's kind of like a Bacta tank bed, if you will. If you're not so sure what a Bacta tank is, it's basically, well, if you remember in Empire Strikes Back, when Luke Skywalker was suspended in one, it heals you, which is what I appreciate since now Boba Fett, unlike what he had in The Mandalorian, he had a lot of scars in there, and now a lot of those scars have diminished, if not pretty much gone. And something else I appreciated during his time in the Bacta tank is that, as he said to Fennec Shand a little bit later, that the dreams have come back. Now, this gave us some flashbacks to Kamino. You could spot Slave One in the background there, but even a little clip from the Clone Wars of when he was younger and where he was holding his father's helmet, and that was obviously Jango Fett. I was expecting, I'm sure like a lot of you, to see finally the moment in live action that's been explored in many other tales throughout the decades of how Boba Fett survived. And to be honest, I felt like they handled it pretty tastefully. It made sense to me, at least. So we saw Boba Fett in the Sarlacc pit slowly digesting, and we saw a stormtrooper there as well, but we also saw that the stormtrooper's armor obviously isn't as good as the armor that Boba Fett was wearing, because you could tell that the armor was somewhat disintegrating. But in this moment, he used his flamethrower to more or less burn the Sarlacc from the inside out, which is pretty logical if you ask me. And then after that, I guess he just kind of climbed his way out, but obviously he's pretty wrecked after going through such an ordeal. So it kind of shows this badass moment that was predicated off this ridiculous moment in Return of the Jedi. I mean, fair enough if you are a fan of how like his jetpack got poked and he was just like, you know, how he fell in. I know that was like a little bit of the funny, humorous magic of the old movies, but yeah, like if you compare both the scenes, the tone is very different, shall we say. And then the scenes after this were a little bit of a montage before we got to the present day scenes. So we saw the Sandcrawler arrive, and the Jawas harvested, or should I say just scavenged, his armor, which makes sense as to how that story got set up with Boba Fett's armor being taken away from him and how that was claimed during the time of The Mandalorian. I was thinking, how long has Boba Fett been kind of laying here by the time the Tusken Raiders came? But this is when they arrived and obviously took him captive, because if you guys remember, Tusken Raiders, if they somewhat find you, similar to Anakin's mother, they can be very much so sadistic, if you will, like Anakin's mother. I think she was made to work, or at the very least by the time he got there in Attack of the Clones, she was just kind of pinned up within that tent. And she was already dying, and from what we saw during this episode, it was a similar kind of thing with Boba Fett, with how they were just kind of keeping him bound there with that Rodian, and, you know, it's just like occasionally they would get the Tusken Raider kids to just, I don't know, poke fun at him, or just literally beat him. It's more of a bit of a sport for them. This is where we see Boba Fett tied up in the Tusken Raider camp. You can see a Rodian there. I did find the Tusken Raider kids a little bit funny with their little, you know, childish Tusken Raider squawks. And this is where he had his first little escape attempt, and I like the kind of reptilian watchdogs, if you will, known as Massifs or Massifs. I don't know how to exactly pronounce the name. One of them tries to stop Boba, but I believe he knocks it out. In this moment as well, when the Tusken Raider kid goes after Boba Fett, he does spare his life, which I find very interesting, because it shows a bit more of the character behind the kind of blunt exterior, which I feel like this episode did do quite a decent job of showing, even even in the present day scenes, he doesn't want to rule like a Hutt. He doesn't want to rule through fear. Also, just, it's also weird just jumping to some of the dialogue a bit later, seeing Boba Fett talk so much, but obviously that is just to be expected compared to like the original films where he barely even said a word. Now, and in The Mandalorian, words are to be spoken. We're not going to get a show where we just have a helmet down, Boba Fett just kind of staring and like cocking his head sideways. But unfortunately, Boba didn't get too far. It's kind of weird saying Boba considering the channel name. And this is where a little bit of a duel ensues. I guess, again, it's for the Tusken Raiders. I suppose this could have been a moment if he won. They might have granted his freedom. I feel like it's as somewhat savage as Tusken Raiders are viewed to be. They do have a bit of honor and respect amongst them. But this is where he got his ass handed to him. But as we know, by the time of the Mandalorian events, he has a Tusken Raider staff. Like, he obviously gets taught in their ways this episode. And as much as I'm looking forward to the premise of that, I do have a few minor issues with what this episode presented. But regardless, overall, like zooming out of those issues, I'm still looking forward to him learning their ways, the way of combat, the kind of respect that he's gained from them, albeit it just kind of is predicated off a little bit of a odd circumstance. But before we visit those scenes and where things get a bit crazy towards the end of the episode with that monster, we wake up in present day with Fennec Shand telling him to basically go down to the throne room because now he's the newly appointed daimyo, I believe they called it. People will be arriving to show their respects. It's kind of like, hey, here's an offering, like we're good with you, like please don't, view us as bad or like, hurt us. We just want to serve you. It's all good. As Boba Fett said, they do really need a protocol droid because they couldn't understand a word of what that first guy said with his tribute offering. And again, I do appreciate the little inklings of humor here for Boba Fett, because at the end of the day, he is a person. He's lived in the galaxy previously as a bounty hunter, so you can only imagine all of the scenes and all of the episodes or movies worth of content throughout the years that this guy has kind of involved himself in with the criminal underworld, the people he would have run into, the conversations and relationships he would have had. He's not to be expected to be this kind of blunt tool. I for one do appreciate a little bit more expression and even little pokes of comedy in lines like this. It's not going overboard. Things like this, where Fett used to work for that Trandoshan, and little bits and bobs like that is completely cool. This is where we get a little bit of storyline set up for a future episode, which I do find interesting. And at the same time, what I'm happy with, at least so far in terms of story, is a lot of it is somewhat making sense to me. So in this moment, the mayor, or should I say the guy who speaks for the mayor, says that the mayor couldn't arrive to offer a tribute, or at least the tribute is more or less just a welcome, a heartfelt welcome. Fennec Shand, as Boba Fett's right-hand woman, should I say, about to say right-hand man, but you know what I mean, says that if he spoke such insolence to Jabba, he would have fed him to somewhat, the creature below. And I'm not gonna lie, we need a rancor back. We need a rancor down there. I want it back. And interestingly, and in a very cocky way, that the mayor low-key wants Boba Fett to somewhat give him a tribute, not the other way around. Now, the reason why this adds up to me is because Jabba the Hutt was viewed with such high reputation, ruled through fear, I guess. Somehow Bib Fortuna did the same way. I mean, after all, he was Jabba's right-hand man. So when you have a guy coming in already, starting to very slowly but surely do things a little bit differently to the ways of previous lords of Tatooine or, Hutts, yeah, I think some people will view that as weak, which is why I guess the mayor is making a bit of a play, the mayor of Mos Espa, to fill the power vacuum left behind from Bib Fortuna. Even though they're like, sure, I'm sure Boba Fett is formidable, but, we can still take him out, which is why those assassins came. That kind of vibe. So obviously this is story set up to when he will visit the mayor after this, and there will be a little bit of a power dynamic at play there, because obviously the mayor, being the mayor of Mos Espa, probably has quite a few forces and all kinds of things up his sleeve ready, and probably has been waiting for a moment to take Bib Fortuna down, for all we know. And then, oh, some other guy did it for me and is already being viewed as weak. Up next, though, we get to see a bit more of Boba Fett's ways. So, when the Gamorreans come in, he doesn't want to straight up kill them like any other sleazebag would have. He says, if I spare your lives, would you basically work for me? Which, is a bit risky at the same time. But what I kind of like is how initially when he took over from Bib Fortuna, they didn't surrender. But through seeing that he would spare their lives, they're willing to maybe be on board with him. Just that kind of show sometimes, even though the show of fear in a power play is quite effective, sometimes more effective, moments like this through a wave of the hand can also be just as, and if not more, effective. And it turns out that, hey-ho, those Gamorreans came in handy later, but to be honest, they easily could have just ran, so that's why it is a bit sketchy. So this is where Fennec Shand and Boba Fett arrive in the streets of Mos Espa, but already more commentary on how Boba Fett is already doing things differently, and the reason why I wanted to include a bit of talk about that earlier is because there has obviously been some time between the end of Mandalorian and now of where word has probably already got out that he's been doing things differently already, which is why he didn't have the respect for the mayor, because the mayor probably heard that, oh, maybe I can overthrow him because he's not really asserting the power through fear. And here, he's not going or being paraded throughout the streets on a freaking litter like Jabba the Hutt would have, or Bib Fortuna. Bib would have just been sat there with his little freaking staff, just like, yes, yes. When we entered the cantina, I did appreciate, if you listen carefully, I didn't notice it at first, but the tune that the Cantina Band is playing is a slight variation on the Episode 4 Cantina Band song, you know, the beep, 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 beep. It was that, but again, it was done a little bit differently. Again, we have the owner, Garza Fwip, a bit kind of confused as to who he was at first because he wasn't being carried to the location on a litter. What he's doing is very much so what you would be doing as somewhat of a newly appointed emperor, if you will, or king or whatever, and that is kind of making your rounds to the places of power that somewhat already support your position or prior position before you took over. So you want to go there and kind of just say, hey, I'm the new boss in town, and you're gonna respect me or die if you're a bad person. But in Boba's books, it's like, hey, I'm just here to let you know that under my rule, your business will continue to thrive. But yet again, through doing this, he's just letting more and more and more people know that, you're being too nice. Like, wait, what? Like, I'm used to Jabba or Bib Fortuna saying, if you do not come up with results, I will kill you and just replace you with a new cantina host. So up next, when the assassins came down to take out Boba Fett and Fennec Shand, I'm guessing on behalf of the mayor. I can't confirm that, but it's at least the most obvious choice for now. I both enjoyed this fight, but also found a few issues with it. That was that kind of typical choreography as to like, why did that happen? But the moment afterwards with Fennec Shand was executed really well and badass, and we'll get to that. We had those guys pop down. Initially, tactically, it made perfect sense. They deployed their shields, kind of forcing Fennec Shand and Boba Fett to just be stuck. Like, how do you get out of that? And what they do is prod. It's like an old military tactic. It works very well, right? But then, it's, look, and this isn't even nitpicky. It's just, it doesn't really add up to me. And this is what The Mandalorian does quite a lot of, and some people care for it, some people don't, but I'm just going to point it out regardless of my enjoyment of the scene at the same time. You have a jetpack, my guy. Why aren't you flying up? The whole time, he just allows himself to get poked and poked and poked, but he doesn't use the jetpack. That was a little bit frustrating to see. You know, you are the Boba Fett. Use your jetpack. That is one of the most attributed things known to you with your reputation, etc., etc. So, like, I don't really see an excuse for that one. But then again, when they did start fighting back, when the Gamorreans came in, fair enough, the Gamorreans came in to help. This was also a bit frustrating. All of the guards, for some reason, let down their shields. They weren't disabled through damage, is what I'm trying to say there. They just put them down. You could still protect yourself with the shield. Again, this isn't nitpicky. The way this comes across is like, it's kind of a bit of a plot contrivance to like help resolve that fight. I can't really see it any other way. As enjoyable as the action was, it was a little bit silly in moments like that. For example, with Jetpack. And for some reason, the guards just putting down their shields. But after that, though, when they managed to take out the assassins, that's when Fennec Shand went after one of them and needed to get one of them alive. This was done very, very well. The way she took him out, it was great. Like, there was no silly moment where the guy was getting up way too slow and could have done something. Nope, she was quick, she was agile, and she just wrecked them, threw one of them off the roof, and then one of them was alive. That was handled, that was like an example of how it was handled very well. But beforehand, the fight, yeah, I saw a few cracks in it. It's just like, for example, the Mandalorian episode where Mando could have got back to the child in that episode when those like freaking death machine troopers were coming down, and he had the jetpack there and he just could have put it on and flew there. Issues like that are important because you know, the whole plot is predicated off of that character's oversight. But of course, I love how Boba Fett just blew one of them up, and Fennec Shand just looked at that other one and was like, "Nah, throw you off," and then he went splat. But yeah, loving this in general, but you know, at the same time, I'm just going to call it how I see it. Due to Boba Fett going back in the bacta tank because he was a little bit wounded, again, it's kind of lucky that these Gamorrean guards are loyal, because they could have easily ran, and I wouldn't have expected Boba Fett to be such an easily trusting person. That's not really an issue, by the way. It's just more of like, like you could argue that they didn't have to be loyal, and through Boba Fett's life experience in the Star Wars galaxy, that could be a bit easy to trust, you know, especially as they didn't surrender in the first place. But this allows him to recoup from his injuries and go into a bit more flashback mode. But again, I could have argued, Boba, you know, if you choose your jetpack, you could have taken him out from the air, etc., etc., and none of this would have happened in the first place. But when we go back to those flashbacks, we see that the Tusken Raider kid takes Boba Fett and the Rodian as a result, because they're both chained together, to look at these, or this moisture farmer getting raided. At the end of the day, you know, water is a very important resource on Tatooine, so moisture farmers are quite the target for raiders or whatever. And this is where he basically wants them to dig for water. Now, this is where a little bit of another issue comes into mind, and I don't have an issue with the kid doing this, because the kid just taking 2 prisoners alone, I guess fairly far away, even at the very least a mile, would be problematic. But like that's not an issue for me, because this is a kid. Like the kid probably thinks he can handle Boba Fett for some reason. I mean, after all, he did earlier, right, when Boba Fett spared him. The bigger issue for me is that these 2 characters, especially when the kid was just chilling the whole time, could have escaped. And the thing is, it's a little bit of a hard sell for me in terms of the story. It's like, Boba Fett, the badass Boba Fett, what are you doing? Do I have to tempt you with this to escape? Like, why are you wanting to be? I don't know. It's a bit confusing. But either way, he digs up the water, and then this leads to a cool little fight with a monster, which may already exist in the Star Wars universe, but I feel like that might be a new creation. Let me know if I missed that in the comments below. I was thinking, is it going to be a baby crate dragon? Did anyone else think that? When you saw the claw, I was like, wait, is there like a baby crate dragon just chilling under the sand? And again, this is where an even bigger hole comes into it, because I totally get why Boba may have a bit of a soft spot for the Tusken Raider kid, and he saved the kid from the monster, and he just basically was a badass. My issue with this after that is, like, fair enough, the kid wanted to go back. He probably even looks up to Boba as a bit of, like, a role model in a sense, and raves about him. Raves about the head, the fight, and how he took him down. They probably respect that, which is why the clan leader offers him some water there. They respect it, so I get where they're going with this. Please do not mistake that. I understand what they're going for here, and how they probably let Boba Fett in, as we know, by the time of The Mandalorian, to learn a bit of their ways and fighting. The bigger issue here of what I can't understand with what Boba Fett as a character is doing, after this moment, after defeating the monster, my guy, you could just walk away. The Rodian was dead, you don't have to drag his body. I just really hope all the die-hard Star Wars fans understand what I'm saying here, but no, Boba Fett just chooses to go back to the camp of which he was being held captive in. And again, I understand that they are willing to, like, probably let him in now. They respect him. Oh, you saved my child, my little child kind of thing. I get it, but it doesn't make sense to the character as to his prior experience before this was just being a prisoner. He just wants to get off this rock, go to Angerhead, get off world, yet he chooses to go back. I don't really understand why. It doesn't really add up. I'm genuinely trying to think in my head. Like, I'm sure somebody will be trying to think of an answer where maybe he felt like he had to go back because he needed, like, a top-up of resources in order to travel somewhere else. But I argue he could have gone to the moisture farmer that they were just looking at, of where those raiders scavenge. So, like, this isn't looking too deep. Like, I believe Boba Fett wouldn't have gone back to the Tusken Raider camp, but for the sake of plot and to push it along for where they're going to go, they do that. But I just believe that the character wouldn't make that action. Like, it doesn't make sense. Would you go back to a slave camp? Well, a camp where you're just gonna dehydrate and die and just be beaten by Tusken Raider kids and just... You know what Tusken Raiders are like. I don't really need to establish this. It doesn't add up. And so, guys, that was the end of the episode. So, honestly, like, overall, I still pretty much really enjoyed it. The biggest thing for me about The Mandalorian and Boba Fett so far, and just already episode 1, is that unlike, personally, in my opinion, just a little bit of a warning there for the sequel fans, unlike the sequels, they really capture the Star Wars essence of the original trilogy in The Mandalorian and this, which is why I can still really enjoy it. It's just, however, I do feel like it suffers from a few things that I mentioned. The fight stuff, I can kind of let slide. I feel like it makes the character look a little bit silly when they're not using things like a jetpack. But when there was the decisions of what I pointed out, like why would you go back to the camp at the end of the episode, or even before that, you're 2 fully grown men, which I want to establish that, yes, I know they were kind of a bit weak, but it's a 10-year-old Tusken Raider child. It's not a challenge, and in the spirit of the character of Boba Fett, I'm pretty damn sure he would want to get out of there at any given opportunity, especially when a child is naive enough to escort you a mile or 2 or 3 away to find water. Like, you're completely alone. You can get away. So I think that is valid criticism there. But all in all, I enjoyed the episode. I'm looking forward to see more of the Star Wars spirit shine through in this show. Looking forward to seeing him assert his empire, if you will, through respect, but also fend off people who don't respect him for his decision to rule with respect, if you're still following me there, like the mayor, and where that will lead things. So let me know what you thought about my thoughts, guys. Stay tuned next week for my review and recap and breakdown of the Book of Boba Fett episode 2. Give this video a like if you did enjoy it. Do consider subscribing to make sure you never miss out on a future video. I do cover all kinds of things as well, so check the channel out. But everybody, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you fellow, well, not bounty hunters, but I don't know, in the next video. Goodbye.